Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is the fourth of our Fireside Chats in the Shoe Techstars series, and I'm very, very happy to welcome Tasha Choi today. Tasha, thank you for joining us. You are a young entrepreneur who grew up in South Korea, and you graduated from the Techstars Berlin program. You did your undergraduate degree in Canada. You live now in Silicon Valley and are at the head of a very successful startup, Highre, which is 2.5 years old and is in a big boom because what you do is virtual career fairs. So perfect timing. You work, Highre works with the leading universities around the country, including Columbia, Georgetown, USC, top employers too, such as JP Morgan, Google, Glassdoor. A very nice success story, and we're very grateful to you to take some time out to talk with us. As you know, we here at Sacred Heart University are developing an entrepreneur ecosystem based around our West Campus, which is the former GE headquarters. We've converted it into an innovation campus. And one of the points of this kind of talk today is to give inspiration to students and young alumni who are trying to find their own career paths. So we're very grateful to you to agree to speak with us. And I just wanted to kick it off by saying, you know, when you graduated from undergrad, you went to work for Hyundai, then you went and worked for Deloitte. Can you tell us a little bit about your early career? You went into large corporations and consulting first. Did these early posts help you to get where you are now? And in what way?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm super honored to be here. Really excited to share my story today. So yeah, I want to start off with the story about my early career, as Martha brought up. So I graduated from University of Toronto in Canada, and then I was lucky enough to find a great opportunity to get involved in technology project, which is called Connected Car, basically a smart car telematics project at Hyundai in California. So that was the beginning of my career. So obviously there was a bit of advantage of being Korean, speaking Korean, having Korean network for a Korean company operating in the US. So it was like a bridge situation where I could put a lot of input as a young person who loved using technology, understanding two different markets. So that's how it started. And from there on, what I saw a lot was these vendors from Silicon Valley coming to Southern California to pitch a lot, to sell their services. A lot of them were radio, text to chat, chat to text, all those startups or Silicon Valley tech companies coming to pitch to larger companies like Hyundai, and seeing them those people who are coming from those companies, just around my age or not so much older, it really inspired me and started getting me interested in what the Silicon Valley world is. Eventually, I moved on to Deloitte, continued working on the tech projects, worked with major manufacturers like Samsung, LG, all those guys. Being involved in those larger scale projects, and eventually I think young person in tech industry and seeing those communications or vendors or startups all the time, it really got me curious about what this world is, what Silicon Valley is, and why these young people are doing what they're doing, and why they're so smart, basically. So that's how my career started in tech industry.
So what can you tell us a little bit about your jumping off point? I mean, how does one go from being a comfortable consultant at Deloitte to picking up your bags and going up to Silicon Valley and starting in a completely different life?
So looking back, I think I always sort of made those big jumps and big decisions from early on. I went to boarding school for high school. I went to University of Toronto instead of choosing to go to university in South Korea, or moving to California. So all those jumps were, I guess it was part of my nature. And then another thing was that of course, there are great things that we can do being a part of larger companies, and they already bring in a lot of interesting topics and projects. But I think I really got inspired by these Silicon Valley companies when they see the problem, how they can move fast, think differently, flexible, and they can just grow their business from 0 to 1 or 0 to big companies. I think that was something so fascinating to me. So I think it was more of my interest than being at a consulting company, living that structured and comfortable life.
Interesting. And your father was an entrepreneur as well, right?
Yes, so he was a young entrepreneur. I remember, when I was young, he started his own business. So he's when they started bringing in this sort of like a Red Bull type of drinks for the first time in Korea. So he was distributing that product. So I remember he was started with like door-to-door sales and growing his business into like multi location businesses. So it was always some inspiration to see how he was always more worried about like how he can work harder and put more input so that he can convert that into revenue than any of the politics or any of the complex kind of like a not so important topic. So I think definitely that was my inspiration for sure.
So I guess it makes sense if he's selling highly caffeinated drinks, if he's looking for ways to work harder. Well, very, very often we see that in entrepreneurs, right? That people start companies that address pain points that they've actually personally experienced in their life. How does that relate to Highre, to the company that you founded? In what way did it address some kind of pain point for you?
Right. So I think there are mainly two parts. First part is my personal experience. So growing up in South Korea, of course, I was one of the luckier ones to go study abroad and work in different places. But like, I was one of those kids who wanted to become an astronaut as I was growing up. And then
I saw on your site you have like the space shuttle. It's one of your logos, right?
Yes. So in my mind, I should be talking to these NASA astronauts when I was like 12. But like in reality, in South Korea, I didn't have any door to that whatsoever. So not only that, like at a few important points in my life, like when I was seeking those guidance or advice, it wasn't sort of like the types of advice or guidance wasn't really readily available to me, nor my father knew an astronaut or anything. And another thing was, of course, like in going to Canada for university was excellent. It was a beautiful country, amazing education, but everything seemed to be happening just across the border. They wouldn't really come to Toronto for hiring a lot of students. So I saw two main issues. One was the visibility. I couldn't really I didn't know what I didn't know. Of course, there should be like a lot bigger, better, more opportunities out there, but I didn't even know what things are, what kind of things are out there. And secondly, of course, accessibility. I wasn't able to access to certain types of network contacts or opportunities that I was hoping to and get in touch with. So that was my personal experience. And eventually that turned into sort of like my huge interest in solving early career problems. When I first went to Silicon Valley, that was when a lot of things started opening up. It was a groundbreaking experience for me. Like when I speak to someone who created Python language itself at a party, or someone who created this app, that app, all kinds of these apps that you guys are aware of. When I see them just as a, like in person, that completely changed my perspectives from these people's or like someone else, like, these are in books or documentaries, not in real life, to this is a part of my life and I can probably do one of those. So I couldn't stop thinking like, what if this happened when I was 5, when I was 10, when I was 15, not like right now. So that sort of like really brought me back those like visibility and accessibility to the role models and opportunity kind of like issues that I experienced growing up. And from there on, so that was my personal part, but then another part was where the market was going. Higher education was sort of like challenged by lots of new online education platforms, and the future of work was becoming bigger and bigger topic even before COVID. And also Gen Z students were thinking and behaving completely differently around technology is now the main consumer of the higher education. So there was a market trend that was changing a lot in the higher education space. So combine that, I started looking into higher education career space as a place that I can work on.
So, I remember when I was graduating from business school, going to a career fair.
Mm-hmm.
This was in France.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was a pretty horrible experience because it was what we would call in French the panier à crabes, literally a basket of crabs. It was like people clawing over each other to talk to recruiters. Yeah. And I remember it was very crowded and it wasn't very personal. So, I just wonder, like now the virtual career fairs that you're offering through Highre, how do they differ and how do they serve the same function in a different way? Yeah. I'm having trouble just imagining what it's like, to go to a virtual career fair versus what I experienced so long ago.
Exactly. So the surprising news is that the career fairs are still operating the very similar way. So it hasn't changed, that much from probably a couple of years ago. And then long time, even when I went to college, it was exactly the same. So it was weird in a way. Like, why is this thing so physical? And they're putting so much money, time, planning, everything, but we can't even track any important key metrics or even numbers correctly. So that was just like something really weird to me. So what we're doing is we are creating the entire career fair experience online. So for example, we do have virtual career fair venue, and then there are workshops, webinar formats are going on. There are virtual booths where students can visit different companies, check out information, drop off resumes, and also we help recruiters and students speak one-on-one, just as if they're talking over the booth, but more scheduled manner, so that it's not crazy, it's not pushing people around. I mean, virtually you can't really do that either, but it's more planned and it's more researched and it's more scheduled, so everyone can be more prepared and happier about the smooth process. And also it's very safe. I mean, it's germ-free, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. So there's a hygiene factor as well, that crowded, unpleasant experience. So it's interesting. I mean, I love your perspective that you want to make it more accessible. I grew up in Arizona, also on a ranch very far away from Wall Street and big banks and big companies. And like yourself, I would have probably benefited from younger having some exposure to those possibilities. But how does it address that pain point? Because aren't these open to college students? In what way are you helping with the accessibility option beyond college students?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, having these career fairs virtual means employers from anywhere in the country or from anywhere in the world could literally just join these events and meet students through either one-on-one conversations or resumes or even group conversations. So we really bring everyone together into one place online. For example, we are super excited to, some of the great examples would be like, these New York students sitting in New York City in their dorm room can meet companies from Silicon Valley, or like we had this online event where students from Mississippi could meet Facebook or Oculus data scientists. So those things wouldn't necessarily happen physically. Also, it's a lot of money to travel around, go reach all those campuses, which is why a lot of companies do have select lists of universities, whether it's 5, whether it's 10, whether it's 25, because it's just physically and economically it's not possible to reach all universities, so they have to have that select list. And being virtual really opens up the door to everyone. That means even smaller companies that used to get a bit overshadowed by larger names are now able to access great talent.
That's excellent. And so that seems really, really cool that you're able to do that. We had a recruitment event last week by a big bank from Wall Street who wouldn't normally come to Sacred Heart. And in fact, when I talked with the recruiter, that's exactly what he said is, in fact, the fact that everything's gone virtual makes it easier for us now, that it's lowered the transaction costs for us to come and recruit on smaller campuses where it wouldn't have made economic sense previously to send a recruiter. Now, since the bar is lower in terms of costs, it opens up that possibility. So